first day I walked in and I met Sid, that was one of the cooler moments. I mean, I had a picture of him on my wall growing up my entire life, and now, you know, I get to see him every single day. I played on a line with him the last couple games. So that was the one moment where when you walk in and you kind of meet those guys who have played for so long and you've watched for your entire life and had pictures and stuff with them on your wall. It's a pretty cool moment.
Welcome to the very first episode of the NOHA Show. I'm the Director of Hockey Operations with the Northern Ontario Hockey Association, Jacob Brown.
I'm Jason Marchand, Executive Director with the NOHA.
Jason, let's talk some minor hockey today. What do we have going on in the North?
No, it's been an exciting start to the season. Lots of fun things going on in terms of development, officiating work that's going on across the North to support our officials. We're getting close to playoff time.
When we talk development, let's just get right into the topic of development. When we talk development, what is the scope of development through our eyes at the NOHA? Because I think there's a very cut and dry version of development where I'm trying to learn how to skate and then eventually I'm trying to score a Michigan. Development is so much broader than just what happens on the ice. Can you explain through the eyes of the NOHA what we mean by development?
So in addition to that, I think there's kind of two different expectations from not only development from the NOHA perspective, but also development from the Minor Hockey Association side. From our end, I believe we're responsible to support our coaches, support our volunteers that are out in the field, with our 10,000 participants to work with them to essentially provide them with the opportunities to grow in whatever way, they're going to ultimately grow, whether that's to play NHL, play major junior, or just play recreational.
Later in this episode, we're going to get to see a really great interview that we had with current National Hockey League player Justin Brazeau of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Justin talks a lot about having fun as a kid. Might sound like a cliche because everybody says have fun all the time, but it is true. And Justin speaks very clearly about how just being a kid playing minor hockey helped him get where he is today. And I think that's a very important message that gets lost on a lot of people. So from your side of things, Jason, you see a lot of cases where people need to professionalize their minor hockey career. Can we talk a little bit about just seeing that development through staying home, eating a home-cooked meal, sleeping in your own bed, and just having fun with your friends?
Yeah, it's almost like Groundhog Day, which was fairly recent here. So, in terms of the belief that you do need to leave home to make it to wherever you want to make it. I know we have done a lot of work over the years to dispel that myth. Justin did a great job in doing that as well. I know our organizations are doing that to try and support that overall message. But, definitely, I think back to when I was 15 and I obviously didn't play sport at that level, but, I was nowhere near ready to leave home to go live with ultimately a stranger, not knowing exactly what was going to happen, how that was all going to work. Logistics to get to the rink and all that fun stuff. And I don't know what your thoughts are, but I'm sure, looking back to when you were 14, 15, and I know you played, U15 AAA, and, I'm sure that was probably very similar, a similar experience.
Yeah, I think for me, as an individual who played mostly AA growing up in North Bay, West Ferris minor hockey, and then transitioning to AAA hockey in that U15 year and ultimately going to high school, I think being at home and not ever having to really worry about outside distractions and just be a kid, you're able to soak up so many more memories and so many valuable lessons learned, not just on the ice, but how coaches treat players, how players treat coaches, how players treat officials and fan and family interactions as well. And it's so important to really just be a sponge. You're still a baby, right? Like when you're playing to the world, you're still so young. And you need to have that opportunity to just soak things in. So personally, for me, I really go back and think how valuable it was for me to just get to play. And as Justin said in his spot too, play sports like golf, play other sports. Obviously, I'm a big baseball fan and a believer of playing multiple sports, and that helps every kid, not just athletically, but develop a sense of maturity and leadership. So while we're on development, let's go right to the first time we put on some skates. We have a great program within the Ontario Hockey Federation, the First Shift program. We have our initiation to play program. We have our U7s. We have our U9s. We have all this great stuff. How important is it or not important is it, if somebody doesn't pick up a hockey stick at 4 years old? Because everybody kind of comes out playing hockey, right? It's the old adage, you learn how to skate before you learn how to walk in Canada. How not relevant is picking up a stick at 4 years old? And if you decide to want to get into the game at 8 years old, what's that avenue like?
I think right now it doesn't exist as well as it should, 100%. And we had Peter Harmsen, president of the OMHA, recently share the program that he had started in Stouffville, which started as a Learn to Skate program, then transitioned into a Learn to Play program. And he runs both now with, I believe he said, close to 400 kids that have gone through it in the last 4 or 5 seasons. So there are programs that are starting to grow out there. He mentioned some neighboring communities that have started, but that's something that really, unfortunately, doesn't exist. There are opportunities for kids to play down with, a more appropriate skill level, but in reality, the ability to enter the game, in most of Northern Ontario doesn't exist outside of, the First Shift program and that ability to play down. You've probably seen that as well, coaching and kids that maybe are older, but that don't necessarily, fit within the skill level of, I guess, the expectations, the skill level of players.
And I think personally, from my vantage point with the NOHA, as well as being a parent and a coach within minor hockey, I think a lot of it is to do with that 8-year-old's come in and wants to play, and people are already talking about being full-time goalies, being full-time defensemen. I'm a full-time right winger. And that player that's 8 years old, they're still trying to figure out if they shoot left or right-handed. So I think with the NOHA, we've had some really great discussions in growing the game and developing new avenues for those players. How are we going to get there, Jason? What can we do? What are we doing behind the scenes that people aren't aware of?
Yeah, well, there's a lot, obviously, in your role, Jacob, focused on development and expanding that role to be really hockey focused as opposed to, kind of the business side of things. But we are working, obviously, with a company that helped us with our strategic plan, and through a couple days of work with our board and our staff, we identified both early or late entry to the game and kind of early departure as to key priorities that we need to focus on, and that's something that we will be doing here fairly soon. And having gone through a similar process with the parent behavior work that we're doing, there will be, I have no doubt, some good ideas that come out of it that we probably aren't thinking of right now. Some things that might exist currently, some things that might be brand new that we ultimately pilot. But I'm personally very excited about the that work that will be starting here very soon.
And obviously, the end goal for that is to see the fruits of that work and that labor spill out onto the ice and create additional registrations, create new registrations. For me, it's amazing to see a kid go from 4 or 5 years old to their U18, their third year U18 year, and then graduate. But it's not the case for every kid. You talked about a little bit about dropout. You mentioned that. Why historically do we see dropout in hockey?
So the data that we have is probably a little bit older, but a lot of it relates to both parents and coaches who are ultimately the influences in the children's lives for the most part. Those are two of the key reasons, but we are also, just kind of as an aside, we're going to have in Scott Furman, who that's his job day to day, is to look at growing the game. And he's got some amazing data, amazing survey feedback that, we're going to share with our people so that we can make, informed decisions going forward. And it's not just based on opinion. We're going to get, the facts that are important to understand.
Awesome. And obviously, we are in a hockey hotbed, being in not only Canada, not only Ontario, but in Northern Ontario. And individuals, young and old, are very passionate about our game. And with passion comes very firm opinions and beliefs. I have my firm opinions and my firm beliefs. And one thing that I'm very firm on is the ability to allow kids at such a young age to explore and expand who they are on the ice. Speaking to the idea of, you're not a defenseman, you're not a right winger, you're not a goalie at 6 years old. You might want to do that right now, and that's fantastic that you do. But getting a full, complete respect for the game, learning individual tactics and fundamentals, learning to really respect what the game has to offer you. It's such an amazing game, but it's such a difficult game. And I think if we put such pressure on our kids to make a decision at 6 years old to, you're a goalie, I know you're really good at it, you're a better goalie than a center. Well, that's great, but why don't I work on skill X and skill Y and become a complete hockey player? The one thing that I'm so thankful for is that I did wait until I was about 9 years old to become a full-time goalie, and I got to skate with my teammates. I got to feel what it was like to score goals, and you gain that appreciation, and I think that gets lost on people, and I think it's a complete human thing, and I think it's pushed. And our volunteers do such a great job to provide avenues for people. I know local to us, East Nipissing provides goalie training seminars with a high-level goalie coach. And that allows kids to kind of try the sport and get out there and do things. But I see so often people want to become a goalie, and then they're sitting there, they're laying on the ice in a practice, and they're not doing the things that they should be doing, that their parents are paying their hard-earned money to do. And that's one thing that there is an opinion tied into full ice hockey versus half ice hockey versus cross ice hockey. We've heard it all, we've seen it all, and there's science-backed reasons why kids need to explore the game and scale the game. So from your perspective, how important is it to just allow the kids to have a stick in their hand and go?
Well, that's what the program's about, quite frankly. And there are recommendations in, the Hockey Canada documentation for reasons that are backed by, by science, by experts, whether that be in child development or in hockey itself. I think from our perspective, we need to do, not a better job, but we need to get out there and share that information, dispel the myths, similar to, the conversation we had with Justin, and really focus on here's why, we recommend certain things, whether it be, not having a full-time goaltender, emphasizing the skating skills, the puck handling skills, etc. I know we've talked many times about, and I share it all the time, a video of Marc-Andre Fleury dressed in full, goaltending equipment, just dangling around, kids in an outdoor rink, and those skills are learned by trying other positions and playing as a player. So from our perspective, obviously, there are strong opinions about various aspects of the game, but the things that are going on are things that are not opinion based. They are backed by by fact, and that's something that I think we take great pride in, is that we try and make decisions based on fact, not based on opinion. I think in part we just need to do a better job of explaining the why and the fact behind it, the science behind it, or the the true story, as opposed to those opinions. And I know you deal with it, from a coaching perspective, and I don't envy, volunteer coaches who are put in that position that know, that go through the training and know the why, and to, obviously it's probably not as bad at U7, U8, but as things go on, and those opinions are probably going to grow stronger, and obviously respect the the work that our volunteers do. So,
So that's a great segue. Why should somebody volunteer their time to coach youth, to get involved in sport? Personally, I love it. I love coaching. I love what it gives me personally. I love what I can offer to the youth, that I'm able to teach it. There's nothing like seeing a kid get something for the very first time, seeing that look in their eye, and then do it again and again and again and again. And it's such a special feeling when you can provide that for a kid. It doesn't always stay bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like it is at U7 and U8. We get to different areas and different avenues when we're talking the representative stream, AAA, AAA, especially when we start moving up to U15, 16, and all of those areas. So I think at the end of the day, we are seeing a little bit of a decline in very good hockey people wanting to get involved in the game because they know what comes with it. At the end of the day, they're not getting paid, right? They're out here, they're doing their best. I've been to clinics that the NOHA's put on ice practical clinics, and I remember one man told me that it was funny because there was two of them sitting in the dressing room, and the one man hadn't skated since he was 9 years old, and the other man had never skated before. And they were out there because there was nobody else to do it. And I applaud those people, and I think it's amazing that those people are wanting to do it. But there are additional people that are in the stands watching, having an opinion, that know the game, that have been involved in the game as a coach, as an athlete, and they just simply don't want to do it anymore. We at the NOHA have worked and are continuously trying to work on different ways to make the game more inviting, not only for athletes, but for volunteers, for officials, and for parents wanting to bring their kids in. What's some of the things that we're doing, again, behind the scenes, that are going to make that a little bit better? I know the coach mentorship program, and there's different things like that, but from your side, Jason, what are some things?
Well, I think, access to resources are much more available now than they were back when I was in your similar role, where, the Hockey Canada Network app and all those types of things are available to coaches to make things easier for them to volunteer. The coaching clinics as well are all now online, which, helps in terms of, especially in our smaller centers where previously you may have had to travel an hour to get to a clinic to obtain your certification. Now it's all done online. So I think we're making it easy. Hockey Canada is making it easier to become involved. But in terms of supports for volunteers, obviously there's a whole bunch of programs that we are involved in that focus on respect, whether that be respect of volunteers, respect of opposing players, respect of officials. So the Green Armband would be a perfect example. I know we're going to talk about that somewhere down the road here, but where we are teaching our officials, one, that they have support, two, to the spectators in the crowd, that these officials may not necessarily lack experience, but they are younger, they are minors, and recognizing that. We also have obviously the parent behavior project that we've just started. With three organizations on board currently, with the goal of obviously getting everyone on board for next season. So there's a whole bunch of programs that and opportunities that are out there available to kind of show that support for all stakeholders, again, whether it's volunteers or not. I guess another thing to touch on just very quickly, we've started to do this season kind of all association calls to share, important updates, for those volunteers that, may be overwhelmed with, in smaller organizations, or just, a vast number of teams that becomes difficult to manage. So just ensuring that our volunteers are aware of what's going on, type of thing. So.
And I think that's great. And we talked about with Justin, again, great interview with him. I thought it was very insightful you're talking to an individual that has gotten to the top of the mountain, right, in his profession, in his career, and he's so humble in the way he speaks and the way he attributes just being a good person to a lot of the why as to where he is and controlling his controllables. And respect is something that every one of us can control. And unfortunately, we see a lot of it, and it's not just in hockey. I know people, when we're in depth in hockey, the way we're in depth in hockey, we see the stories about the negatives and everybody getting upset at this and getting upset at that. It's not just hockey. It's a human nature to see something that you don't like and speak about it. But there's a way to respectfully get your point across. And there's so many different things that the NOHA, that sport in Canada in general has equipped us with resources to get our point across. And it never needs to come to berating a youth, berating a volunteer, or berating an official, whether that official has a green armband on or not. Respect is such an integral part. I was very fortunate growing up and playing the game to have good role models that respected the game, that respected the individuals that they were surrounded with. And that really is so important for a young kid to be molded by. So when we're out and we're screaming and yelling and getting upset at different things, remember who you're affecting. Because you're not just affecting the present moment, people's opinion of your behavior. You're affecting not just your child, not just that child, but everybody in attendance and the way that they see things and the way that they're introduced to the game, or the way that they want to go to the games, but they don't want to hear that anymore. So respect is such a big part. And I think it'll go a long way. Just that one word goes a long way to getting above and beyond all the resources that we have. If people feel like they're respected and they feel like it's a safe environment to be involved and whatnot, they're going to come. They're going to come back. They're going to be involved. And we have some great people at associations as volunteers, great volunteers within the NOHA, great volunteers all over the place. But imagine how much more we'd have if everybody felt like there was an inkling of respect.
Yeah, I think generally, that does exist. Obviously, we hear about the negatives, but as you stated, we have amazing volunteers, not just on the NOHA board, but volunteers at amongst our 60 associations, that essentially make sure that hockey exists, and they don't deserve some of the things that they have to deal with. Our people don't deserve the things that they have to deal with. But I guess spinning it as a positive, like that's not all they deal with all day. Like there are some extremely good things that happen out there. And I know from our end, we're trying to share those things, to show that despite some of the negatives, there's a whole bunch of great things that happen. Received some feedback from, for example, the Sioux Pee Wee tournament that was held on the weekend. They had 134 teams, which is the most teams they've ever had, which is amazing. There are obviously some challenges, but there's been lots of good feedback that has been shared with me on, a whole bunch of things in terms of the organization, in terms of the officiating, et cetera. And, it's obviously difficult to ensure that you can, manpower, that many teams in a tournament, but by all accounts, the officiating was solid, and I think those are the types of things that we need to recognize. That there's lots of good. There's tons of good, and I think we don't do a great job currently of spinning that.
So let's fast forward a little bit, anticipating some really fun events that we have and great opportunities for our athletes. Coming up in May 1st, third weekend, the Ontario Hockey Federation's Program of Excellence event for 2011 birth year players is going to be held in New Liskeard. It'll also double as a evaluation opportunity for those that are hoping to be selected for the Ontario Summer Games. It'll take place in the Waterloo region at the beginning of August. Additionally, the NOHA, by the time you're seeing this, hopefully we'll have our development weekend registrations out for U13, U14, and a new Team NOHA open weekend out for athletes as well. So we have a lot of really fun things, good opportunities cooking. We've talked about doing some different skills camps and things like that in the summertime. So we're working behind the scenes, trying to make more opportunities for kids that want to get on the ice and have some additional fun in addition to their club teams.
And I will add very quickly, our AGM coming up in June in the Sioux, we will have a close to a Sioux resident and former NHL Coach of the Year that we'll announce here shortly as our guest speaker for that night. So
Awesome.
Looking forward to sharing that information.
All right, Jason. So obviously we had a great opportunity to sit down and have a discussion with Justin Brazeau. Let's hear it. Joining us today, we have a really exciting guest, proud NOHA alumni and current forward for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Justin Brazeau. Justin, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Just want to kind of dive in. We'll dive in right away a little bit on your minor hockey experience in Northeastern Ontario, being an NOHA athlete. Just talk to us a little bit about how you got started and how you fell in love with the game and what brought you to today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of those things where, growing up, hockey was kind of what everybody did. I remember from an early age, I think 2 or 3 years old, my dad had a rink in the backyard. So I was kind of thrown into it right away. Obviously, I fell in love with it right from a kid. I think I have pictures when I was a kid, falling asleep in my helmet and with the stick and stuff in my hands. So it's something I've always kind of loved, and being able to play up north and with all your buddies and stuff is, so much fun. And I think I never really grew up expecting to kind of take it this far, but I just play because I love the game.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about hockey in the North, and you're an individual that decided to play your entire minor hockey in Northern Ontario. You were fortunate to get on with the North Bay Battalion. You had a great major junior career there, and that led you to some professional experiences in the AHL, which obviously now you're in the National League with the Penguins. Talk a little bit about how staying in the North while you got older, kind of that U16 AAA year, playing for the Cubs up in New Liskeard and things like that, how that kind of helped you and just allowed you to let loose, be a kid and play the game you loved.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think growing up, obviously playing the NHL was every kid's dream, but it wasn't like something I really thought. Like once I got to that 13, 14, 15 age, I think you kind of slowly started to realize, like I was in my head, I was like, that's not my end all. I wanted to just play the game to have fun. But I think, at that 15 age after I got drafted, I had a chance to maybe go down to Powassan and play in the NOHA that year. But, I think for me, I just wasn't ready to leave home. I think, being able to be home with some friends and family, just continue to enjoy the game. I played a lot of like high school sports that year too. I think that was so big for me personally, just not rushing into it. I think sometimes this game's tough. I think if you try to push the envelope too quickly like that, I think you can start kind of taking it as a job and not as much just the game you grew up loving. So I think that was really big for me, just to stay back, develop my confidence. Obviously, I was in situations in my second year with the Cubs where, I was a go-to guy. I played a lot of heavy minutes, obviously. And I think that stuff just helps so much. I think if you start chasing it too much, like I said, it kind of becomes like that job and you don't, have that love for it.
From a minor hockey perspective, Justin, and our friend Rick Barron is probably going to be happy with this question depending on your answer. But if you can talk about, any coaches in Liskeard, that may have influenced you and kind of helped guide you to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have too many growing up. I had Rick, obviously, he played a big part, especially early on when I was younger. He was great. I think my dad, a lot of the time, was either assistant coach with him or he was a head coach. So I'd say both of those two when I was really young, kind of up into that midget age. But then for me, Dan McDonald's probably the biggest person I have to thank in my career. I mean, obviously, I had him in midget, but without him, his connection with Stan Butler for me to go to the OHL, I think, nothing would have ever happened. I remember, I think it was the day of the draft. He ended up calling him and kind of told him to take a chance on me and, draft me and see what came of it. And, obviously I owe a lot to him for my career for, opening that door and allowing me to kind of get started.
Awesome. And hockey and life in general is all about adversity, how you face it and overcome it. And obviously, somebody such as yourself that's reached the highest level and have maintained the status of an NHLer now for quite some time. What are some adversities that you faced going up through minor hockey, through major junior, and through your pro development as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it took me a little longer to get here than most NHLers probably do. I think just the adversity of kind of taking the long way. I think nothing was ever really handed to me. I think I did a pretty good job of any opportunity I got, I earned it. Nobody really gave me a free pass. I didn't have the luxury of being the first round pick to the NHL, where you maybe get a little bit longer of a runway or a leash. Um, So I think just, that mindset of I always believed in myself. I always believed that, especially after I want to say my first year in the OHL, I was kind of like, okay, I can play in this league. But then after my second year in the OHL was really when I was like, all right, I think I can maybe, I don't know if play in the NHL, but if I can really kind of make something out of hockey for myself. But even after that, I mean, I scored 60 goals my last year in the OHL and I never even got an NHL contract. So I think, anytime stuff like that happens, it can be taken the wrong way. But I think personally, I always just kind of believe that I knew my ability. I knew it might take me a little longer than most people. I knew I probably played the game a little differently than where the game was trending at the time. That time was starting to trend to like the small scale guys. But I think there's kind of been that, flip a little bit with a little bit bigger, heavier style hockey. But I just never lost that belief that, I knew I could get where I, wanted to go. I just had to keep working no matter how long it took me.
Just kind of to the the workload. What did that look like for you? Kind of out of season. When the warmer weather comes and you're able to get out on the golf course and whatnot. But what did that workload look like from a continuing to develop perspective? During the off season.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me early on, especially when I was in junior, I moved away from Liskeard a little bit. I kind of went down to like the North Bay Sudbury's just because, like, up in Liskeard, there's not as much ice. Like, you can't really skate until mid to late July, even almost sometimes in August. So, it was kind of moving down there, working out, 5 days a week, trying to skate as much as I possibly could. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say anything too crazy. It was just more dialing in on, I think the most important thing when you're working out, it's not necessarily working out 15 times in the week. It's what you do while you're in the gym and making sure you're focused in on, what your body needs the most at that time. Obviously everybody's in kind of different stages of, their career. And I think when you're younger, a little bit more weights and stuff. And now I'm at a point in my career where it's, I'm not as heavy into the weights. I'm kind of more into like making sure my body's ready for a long season and stuff like that. But I think it's not wasting time. I mean, people I think sometimes can think, oh, I worked so hard today. I was in the gym for 2.5 hours, but it's like, there's no way you're really doing that much for yourself in 2.5 hours, but you can get it in 45 minutes. So I think making sure you're just dialed in with, you have a purpose of what you're doing.
Yeah, that's great. And I kind of, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I'd like for you to dive into it a little bit. To the young athlete watching this, how important when you were coming up, not just when you started taking hockey serious, like, hey, I can be a pro at this, how important it is for an athlete or a human to control the controllables and not worry about outside noise, just focus on what you're doing, not what everybody else is doing. How important is that?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think if you start thinking about stuff that you have no control over, it's going to eat at you so quickly in this game. I mean, especially now with social media, obviously it's a little different. Maybe when you're a minor hockey kid, you're not going on Twitter and seeing people chirping you. But, I've always kind of been taught, like, you can control your work ethic and your attitude. So that's the only two things you can control. You can't control, how much ice time a coach is going to give you, how much opportunity you're going to get, this and that. You just have to, keep working, do what you can do to, control that and just kind of see what happens. I mean, if you start thinking about other things in this game, it's a lot. You just kind of have to, work your hardest and have as much fun with it as you can.
You had mentioned, the year that you had scored 60 plus goals with the battalion and not getting a NHL contract. You kind of touched on controlling the controllables, but how did that kind of push you to to perhaps work harder? How did that motivate you to put in the additional work to get to obviously where you're at now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's probably been one of the tougher things in my career was, not that I expected a contract or anything like that. Like I never expected it, but I mean, I think anytime somebody has 60 goals, most of the time people have gotten that kind of opportunity. But after it obviously didn't happen and I knew it wasn't going to happen, it was one of those things where I knew I probably wasn't going to step into the NHL the next year anyways. So what is the difference between an American League deal and an NHL deal at that point if you can do the same things and earn an NHL contract after? So I think I kind of took it like that. Obviously I was going to Toronto where I knew there was, a lot of bodies there and a lot of, it was a pretty crowded depth chart, but I thought it gave me a really good opportunity to kind of continue with, the development side. I think it was close to home. They offered me the ability to go down there in the summer and, I moved away and lived down in Toronto for the whole summer and worked out with them 5 days a week, skated every day with them. I had all their, development staff that the NHL players use and I got to use them every day. So I think, mentally for me, it was just kind of like, all right, I'm just going to take these next year or two to kind of develop and use as much resources as I can here. Because like I said, I knew I probably wasn't going to step into the NHL the next year or two. So it was kind of the same path, just with a different, name on the contract.
Yeah. So circling back to Toronto, obviously talent isn't an automatic ticket. You might get a look, but it's not a guarantee for you to stay in the NHL or at high levels just with talent on talent alone. With your time in Toronto, you leave Toronto, you do the Providence thing, the Boston thing, which was great. Kyle Dubas brings you back to Pittsburgh. That's something about your character and the way you handled things in the American League when you were in Toronto. So we just talk about the characterization of Justin Brazeau and what your makeup as a person outside of a player is as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many players in this game that, kind of do similar things. I think, when I play in the American League, like there's so many good players down there, but everybody can do the same sort of thing, but there's always got to be something that kind of sticks out and, separates you from other people, whether that's, physicality, this, that, or other things. And I think one of the things for me is just, I think I have the ability to kind of think the game, play a different way than, I can kind of play more of a skill game. I can kind of play more of that fourth line game. And I think more the character for that is just like, I don't care what my role is as long as I can flourish in it and do it to the best of my ability. And yeah, obviously, like you said, when Kyle brought me back, I was really thankful for it. I thought, when I signed with him in Toronto, his one message to me was just to come in and work as hard as I possibly could and try to, get my body to the right spot to play in the, the NHL. And I thought, even though it didn't work out for me there with him, I thought I did everything he asked for. I thought I put the work in. I was there from day one of summer right up to training camp. I was there even the COVID year. I remember from, obviously there was a couple months where we couldn't do much, but the second they started allowing people in that facility, I was there in August and I was there for 5 or 6 months with the potential of not even playing a season, and we lost half our pay that year. So I think just showing him that, I was willing to do whatever it took to make the NHL and be here, obviously hopefully stuck with him.
So something kind of tying into last year, something that we probably don't know much about, but just if you can put us kind of in your shoes, getting traded at the, trade deadline to Minnesota, kind of how that all happens and, kind of how difficult and how quickly that move needs to be made. And then maybe if you can kind of talk on as well. So Marcus Foligno is another NOHA player, just, perhaps having, another Northern Ontario voice with that team.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that was something new for me in my career. Obviously being in, the American League for the previous 5 years, it's like, it's not really a thing that happens down there, trades, unless you're, a young prospect maybe getting traded in a package for somebody in the NHL. But so yeah, I think going into the year, I never really thought about it. Obviously, I was having a pretty good start to the year personally, and then but team wise, we weren't kind of doing what we were supposed to be doing. I think a lot of people had higher expectations for us, and so did we. So I think leading up to the deadline, I knew there was a possibility of it, just with the expiring contract and stuff. But obviously, I never really expected it to happen. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's you realize pretty quickly at that moment that it's a business. Like no matter how good of a person, how good of this or whatever you are, like you're just a piece, and anybody can kind of get traded at any moment. So yeah, it was kind of a crazy day. But obviously, I loved my experience in Minnesota. I think being able to have the opportunity to go there and play playoff hockey that I was going to get with the Bruins was big. Having guys like Moose and stuff there is huge. I remember he was one of the first guys who texted me when I got traded. He brought me over because obviously my wife is in Boston still packing up the apartment and stuff. And we were on a road trip. So I remember we went to Carolina and I got traded right after the game in Carolina and went the next day and played in Vancouver. And I never got back to Boston until this summer. So it was one of those things where I called her and I was like, hey, we're going to Minnesota. You're going to have to pack everything up. Somebody's going to get in contact with you from Minnesota team and kind of plan everything to get you out there. But yeah, it was a crazy day, but he had me over to dinner with his family at his house and made me feel really welcome. So yeah, he was great to have there. Obviously with the Northern connection, was kind of easy to make that connection and get to know him a little bit, and having some mutual friends and stuff definitely helps.
As an individual from Northern Ontario, I'm sure you're very familiar with the idea that people have. I need to go to Southern Ontario or other places to play my U16 AAA year to get noticed, so I'm not left behind in Scout's eyes. Individuals are so enamored by the concept of playing in big leagues down there and essentially removing themselves from a small pond and becoming a small fish in a very big pond. How much can you attribute home cooking, sleeping in your own bed, just being a kid and having fun playing hockey? How much can you attribute that to today's success?
Yeah, I think for me, that was everything. I think there's no chance I would have been ready to leave at that age to go down there. I think, like you said, just staying home, enjoying the game, playing with your buddies. I think that's what it's all about. I always have been told and said that if you're good enough, somebody's going to find you. Just because you go down there does not mean you make the NHL. Just because you go down there and spend a bunch of money and stay away from your family and probably don't have as much fun does not mean you're going to make it to the next level. You can make it to that next level no matter where you play if you're good enough. You don't have to chase trying to prove yourself. Just stay where you are and have fun, work your hardest. Sometimes even the opportunity of, if you are that good player, playing more minutes, having a bigger role, having a more of an impact on the game. Sometimes when you go down there, there's so many kids. And like I said, so many kids can play this game at such a high level. You can kind of get lost in the crowd, and then you're just kind of blending in. Whereas maybe you stay home and you go down there for a tournament and, the right guys there to watch you, and you have one of those games where you take over the game. You can separate yourself that way as well. So I think it was big for me. Just, obviously, like I said, I wasn't ready to leave. But some of my best memories are playing on that, the Cubs team with some of my best friends in the world. So yeah, I definitely would recommend it.
Okay, so let's get authentically north here. The north is known for some cool, rustic, old school barns. Can you give me 3 of your top arenas in Northern Ontario that you remember playing in growing up?
Ooh, growing up. See, it's hard for me now. I would definitely say North Bay Mem Gardens, only because I played there for junior, and that was my favorite barn even in junior with all the other ones. I'm trying to think though. I remember, for some reason, Hearst a lot playing up there. I think it was just because it was so far, and I think we had an NOHA up there the one year. I'm trying to think of another one. What's the... I didn't like Timmins. Never liked Timmins. Yeah, I think I would say probably the Cap and the Hearst are the 2 I remember the most. Just from playing, minor hockey, NOHAs up there. Also playing Cap for the Cubs, and that was always kind of a big rivalry for us trying to beat them.
Awesome. What about you? Do you have any favorite barns, Jason?
I had never been, but when I first started working with the NOHA, there's many conversations about the rink in Cobalt. It closed shortly thereafter, but I've heard many stories about the boards and the lack of glass and that type of thing. But I do enjoy Hearst with the moose and the smoke coming out of the nose. But I've been to most. Hearst would probably be up there as well.
So just authentically North, and I love that stuff about Northern Ontario, and I really appreciate you coming on here. Back to the Pittsburgh Penguins, how cool is it for Justin Brazeau, the first day he walks into the dressing room in Pittsburgh, and you see Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, not only to play with those guys, but like, man, all the hard work that I've done, the gym days, the sacrifices, the late nights and all that stuff, it's kind of put me in this situation, and now I have one of the best opportunities in the world with three of the biggest names the sport's had.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, I think I've always been somebody where, like, when I was in Boston, Toronto, when I met like the NHL guys, I never really had too much of the wow factor, because I was always kind of like, this is where I want to be. I want to be teammates with these guys. So I never allowed myself, or like, yes, I grew up watching a lot of them, but I never kind of thought anything of it, because I was like, I want these guys to be my teammates. But I will say the first day I walked in and I met Sid, that was one of the cooler moments. I mean, I had a picture of him on my wall growing up my entire life. And now, I get to see him every single day. I played on a line with him the last couple of games. So like, it's one of those things where that was the one moment where when you walk in and you kind of meet those guys who have played for so long and you've watched for your entire life and had pictures and stuff with them on your wall. It's a pretty cool moment.
Well, no, Justin, we thank you very much for joining us. You're our first guest on our NOHA Show podcast, and what a first guest to have. Your insight on minor hockey in the North, your experiences graduating through minor hockey, the Ontario League draft, and all the way up to present day with the Penguins. We really appreciate your time, and hopefully we can have you on here again sometime in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so all in all, just fantastic that Justin was able to join us. Fantastic we were able to speak to the things that we were able to speak to. Jason, if people want to stay informed with the NOHA, what's their best method of doing so?
Yeah, the NOHA website's noha-hockey.ca. From there, we obviously have up-to-date information around what's going on, around our programs. There's also an ability to sign up for our newsletter, which we share, important information whenever we need to. And obviously our Facebook and Instagram pages as well for, any information that and details around what's going on in hockey in Northern Ontario.
Awesome. So there you have it. You got to hear us speak with a current NHLer. You got to hear us speak to some initiation piece, welcome to the game, how to stay into the game. We got to speak a little to recreation players versus representative players, and more, much more is going to be available to you on the next version of the NOHA Show.